I'm going to gavel this one into order. Welcome to the February 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Encinitas Planning Commission. It is 6 o'clock on the button. We start with a roll call. Let the record show that we have 4 planning commissioners present, with Commissioner Prendergast absent. And we like to start each meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you like to join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This next up on my agenda, usually I'll have any announcements. I'm going to lead off here because last week I was absent. I recused myself for one of our main agenda items due to a financial conflict. And I got to say, I went home, I watched the meeting, and all of my fellow commissioners here, I was so proud of you guys. You really handled yourself so professionally, the way you dug into the questions. I mean, Steve, you pulled everyone back on course when they drifted. Susan, you hit up points that I usually miss, which is like saying nice things about the nice things. I usually focus on the problems. And Chris, you were brilliant. I mean, the way your questions came at this measured pace, there was a couple of, during your testimony when you were questioning the architect, I had to take my little earbuds and I went to my wife, I says, come here, you gotta watch this. It was a really good meeting and you guys did wonderfully well, and it makes me feel really comfortable knowing that, I could be gone. Not the essential guy. You were awesome, and I wanted to say that officially. Thank you. And are there any other announcements? What goes on in this portion here? Let's see. At this point, we will move on to oral communications. Do we have any oral communications this evening?
We have none.
We have none, okay. Well, I will skip the full description of how that works. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
The agenda has 4 items on the consent calendar. We'll move there immediately. The 4 items on our consent calendar are the approval of the minutes for October 6, 2022 Planning Commission, October 20th Planning Commission meeting, and also the November 3rd, 2022 Planning Commission, the last meeting of the year. And we also have item 6D, which is the City of Encinitas safety element. Now, the safety element would have been discussed. It was originally agendized as a regular item, but it's been moved to, staff has recommended we continue this item off calendar. Anna, is there any idea on when we might see this item back? Or why are we continuing this?
There were 3 reasons why it needs to go to the Environmental Commission, and the meeting that it was supposed to go to was canceled.
Okay.
There needs to be a conclusion of the tribal consultation. And then there was a 3rd reason, which was to address public comments that were received. So additional time was needed.
Fair enough. And we'll see that soon enough. That's an important element of our general plan. So we have those 4 items on our consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull one of those items? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
I've got a motion to approve the consent calendar.
All right. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Chris Ryan seconding. And we'll move to a vote. Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Prendergast absent. And the regular agenda, we are skipping this. There are no items on our regular agenda. Do we have any future items added by planning commissioners? We'll do our planning commission reports. I think Susan Sherrod has something for us from the El Camino Real Specific Plan Task Force. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan then. I think staff, do you have something to put up on the screen?
Okay, so, sorry about the mic. Okay, so anyway, we had met back in October, we had the walkabout, and we hadn't actually discussed it in the task force. So in addition to the event that we had the draft development standards, we also did a recap of the walkabout. And so we're right now sort of in the fall, the winter area when we met, but now we're moving towards more into the winter on the sort of the map of where we are for the El Camino Real specific plan for the El Camino Real corridor specific plan. And so, see if I can get this thing there we go. Okay, so the walkabout started from Starbucks, went down to Garden View Road, and we stopped there. It's a little bit of an open area on El Camino Real, just in front of the North County Auto Center. We crossed over at Garden View and went south back towards Via Molena, and we stopped at the bus stop there. At each stop, we were supposed to evaluate what we were looking at. Stop 3, we went on to Cochixon Restaurant, and we stopped there. Went on, and then stop 4 at Solana Center, and then a debrief about what we saw, our observations and thoughts about it. And so these were our discussion points. Under priorities for amenities, public amenities would be things like open space, gathering areas where seating might be, the creek, which is basically in front of the trailer court area, which right now is really neglected, and it's got this masonry wall in front of it. You can see it, it's in between stop 1 and 2 there on the little map. Branding would be things like, maybe like our Encinitas sign is on 101 on the Coast Highway. Maybe branding at bus stops so that they have more than a simple bench and trash can, which is all they have right now mostly. A lot of our bus stops don't even have lighting, so lighting is another consideration. Lighting makes people feel safe, right? Bike racks, maybe we're lacking, or, maybe also in terms of branding, they could be a certain style that kind of unifies how things look. We also have some historic markers on El Camino Real. They're sort of bell shapes, and they denote historic use of that road. Other discussion points about the housing. We need affordable housing, of course. It's an amenity that provides for affordable living, and in an area where it's just walkable. It's more equitable. We talked about how the topography on the street, it actually has a slope over the distance that we walked, about a 1.5 mile walking distance total. But as we walk down towards Garden View, it's going downhill, and then it's coming back uphill a bit as you come back south. And then the Solana Center is at a high point. So we talked about how it's different in different areas and how that might affect siting of a building or development of some sort. We talked about parking and how that might be for having it be, should it be close to the street? Should it be further back? What about people overflowing onto residential streets with parking? And then the height of the existing developments, how that, and the scale, how that might be with new development, how much height we might think would be appropriate for new development mixed in with the existing. And then, the housing, should it be mixed use with, say, commercial spaces below, residential above, or some other configuration? Should it be 100% affordable, mixed income? What should it be? And then we talked a lot about the walkability versus the car-centric nature. And pretty much, I think most people felt it's very car-centric. It has 32 driveway access points. So in a walkable area, you probably wouldn't see quite so much traffic going in, maybe turning right in front of you there and you're waiting, right? Or the sidewalks tend to be right next to the curb and the roadway. It tends to be that there is a bike lane that's not protected on El Camino Real. It tends to be feeling very much made for cars. And so there's quite a bit of concern about the safety due to that. We talked a lot about the aesthetics. How do these buildings appear to us that are already there? Are they inviting? Are they places where we feel like we want to walk there? Or are they more or less sort of, people talked about different concerns. I'll tell you about the public comment at the meeting in a minute. So anyway, and then setback is how far is the building going to be set back from the street? There are certain required setbacks, but then again, a lot of our city was built before incorporation, and so there's a variety of what's happening along this corridor, and what do we want to see happening? What would be our objective or our most desirable outcome for a setback to be? Step backs are the stories above the first story that, of course, step back further from the roadway, and we talked about that. And then we just talked in general about how did it feel? How did it feel to walk down this area and walk back up, and how did it feel at the different stops? So then we were asked for feedback, and of course I'm the only planning commissioner attending that meeting, so I thought it very appropriate to bring it here and maybe get some more feedback that we can have on record as what other planning commissioners think is appropriate. And so the parcel sizes, I'll go back one slide just so you can see, maybe I can go back. Yeah. And the bottom on the right there, you can see that there are 28 individual parcels. 6 are large, 5, and they're greater than 7.1 acres. 5 are medium, 3.1 to 7. 4 are small, 1.6 to 3 acres, and 13 they consider to be rather undersized at less than 1.5 acres. So the question was, are these smaller parcels feasible for redevelopment and based on these sizes? And then the other questions about setbacks, step backs, heights and amenities and parking, what should it look like for walkable aesthetics? I'm going to move through the presentation before we go to discuss it, but then we were presented with the draft development standards, which actually, it was a very nice, neat list, which I brought with me just so that I could have more detail, but because it's hard to sort of process a lot of detail at once, I just gave the 11 different categories. They are common open space, paseos, mobility improvements, small business supports, Encinitas Creek Trail, what do we do? Affordable housing, landscape improvements, historic branding, green buildings, and utility infrastructure. And so they had come up with some point system, because that was the request of our prior meeting. After the walkabout, people really wanted to see, well, how would we weigh these different kinds of public amenities? And so one question, a big question of this is, did we miss any category here? They seem to cover a lot of ground, but is there anything missing from these categories? And then, let's see if I can, there we go. The public comments, public attends task force meetings, and their public comments, I also have some notes from those. Here they are. Yeah. So aesthetics, greenhouse gas emissions, traffic and road congestion, air quality, parking impacts to adjacent residential communities, circulation and transportation, population growth in general issues, land use and planning, open space versus covered, that kind of thing. Are we going to provide broadband, high-speed internet for people who are in that walkable area? Exterior lighting, housing, noise, wildfires, exiting evacuation route, biological habitat with native plantings. Would we require natives? Inland from sea level rise, so it's probably a consideration that this is a safer kind of location. Cultural resources, there could be, we don't know. We may have to study that. Economics of doing projects. Anytime you do the redevelopment in a city location like this, that is an economic engine for the city, we have to think about what we're doing. If right now retail establishments are waning and we're seeing empty buildings that aren't generating revenue, it might be, well, should we bring in housing, or should we encourage commercial office space? What should go there? What would best be economically most feasible? And the other economic aspect is for the tenant, of course. If we do put housing there, it should be, if there's, let's say, a live-work space, maybe they can walk to get groceries and entertainment, maybe for them economically, they don't need a car anymore, maybe, I don't know. But those kinds of back and forth discussions. And then the social aspects of our aging population, Encinitas does have a majority of an aging population. We have to consider social aspects, and accessibility for infirm people, and opportunities for people who are not wealthier. So I'm going to go back to, maybe I can go back?
If I may take this time.
Okay.
Sorry, Commissioner Sherrod. I just wanted to take this time to say that this part of the agenda is for reporting purposes. And if you're requesting feedback, the item would have to be agendized. So I just wanted to make sure that it's more of a reporting to the Planning Commission rather than, yeah.
Okay. So we don't want to ask questions right now? Okay.
I think the point is, we certainly don't want to vote on something and say, yes, we think certain number of acres is proper.
I guess if there's feedback,
Our
they
lawyer
can.
has feedback here.
Right, and I think, Mr. Chair, you're on the right path. You can ask questions, but you should not have any in-depth discussion and providing feedback direction. I think the best thing is just ask questions, and then if you really want to provide feedback as to, for her to, the commissioner to take back to the task force, to agendize it so that way you can have clear direction. That makes sense.
Makes sense. I think we will be seeing this. This is definitely coming to the Planning Commission. This is that kind of thing we get.
The public comments, I can give you a little more detail about what they said. Incentives to owner developer were one of the public comments about it. Concerns about trash from people who, if you're walking up and down leaving trash. Some people were concerned in the public comments about people sitting in cars, perhaps smoking or drinking or doing other things that maybe not everybody would really want to see. Parking on surrounding streets, problems with apartment complexes, let's see, city resources used, worrying about seeing the wall of building, like they don't want to see, the public comment meant that they didn't want to see buildings that were sort of just these vertical walls going up down the corridor.
And we have plans in place that prohibit that. We have our new
Yeah,
specific
we have
design.
already got zoning
Yeah.
that applies to that. But this is that they were saying, and then some people didn't want to see residential with restricted driving options. Some people, this is just what people said, public comment. People don't feel safe walking there right now. They hope that we can all work together and make it a safer experience. Someone asked for traffic data. They want us to have data about the traffic.
I have a question for you, Susan. On the timeline, it appeared that December, the draft specific plan would be out for review. And I'm kind of like, wow, what's in it? And was that December of '22 or '23? Is that December of end of this year? I don't know, that's a question. When the timeline mentioned that there would be a draft specific plan, and I can't remember, when is that?
The draft-specific plan was supposed to be, this kind of, I think, was kind of it. It says draft on it,
Oh, okay.
these different topics. It says draft community benefits program at the top of it, so it's not the specific plan. This is,
Right, because the specific plan is usually,
that should be the next step.
You need a binder for that.
I think it should be the next step. So I think it's important if we have any feedback from public, that they get it now. Because I think they're working on it next. I think they will have a third workshop this winter still.
And I think if any housing is incorporated into this plan, it's going to trigger a Prop A vote, because it will be a intensification of residential use. So that'll be interesting. I think it's reasonable. We'll have to see how that goes. It's
Okay.
going to be heavily discussed here, and then probably at council, and possibly at our
And
next
then
election.
another public comment was, what is the purpose? Why are we having a specific plan on this corridor?
Oh, that's a good
And
question.
basically, the answer to that is that, we already have several specific plans in Encinitas, and this would be another type of overlay area, just with specific standards.
It's one of our most important corridors with the most friction. When we broke into districts, that was one of the big discussions. Every district should touch El Camino Real because it is so essential. I mean, the highway moves right through us, very little friction. The 101 has a lot of friction, is slowed down, but El Camino Real is still a major transit corridor, and it goes right through the middle of our city, and it predated our incorporation as a city. So yeah, it's so important. It deserves its own plan.
Well, we've already had 2 workshops that were open to public, that many comments were collected, and I think they've been incorporated into the thinking of these draft benefits, that they came up with.
I think we're probably at risk of drifting into deliberation right now. I'm super looking forward to seeing this, and I'm sure, and I know for a fact, this is meat and potatoes for the Planning Commission. So we'll be seeing this. If it's December 23, we'll be seeing it first. So
Yeah. And I just add, thank you, Susan, for attending those meetings. It's nice to get this report, and it's exciting to see what might come back from it. So I appreciate you updating us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks. Thank you.
I have a report. So I attended, last week I attended the city council meeting where staff presented at-grade crossings in Leucadia, in northwest Encinitas in Leucadia, and they presented some plans to city council, and then it's moving through a process that I can't sit here and fully describe to you right now, but it looks like there's progress toward 2 at-grade crossings in Leucadia, between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa. And then I attended what was called a workshop on Monday this week, room across the way, and I'm happy to report that some of my neighbors did a really outstanding job getting the word out to a lot of Leucadia who were, in particular, people who were outside the notice area, because I'm about 4 streets east, and I was not noticed because it's outside of the notice area. So our neighbors went around and they put in everybody's mailbox, piece of paper saying, come to the workshop. I think they called it a community, they didn't actually call it a workshop, they actually called it something a little bit more vague, which ended up being good, because it wasn't what you would really consider a workshop. But when I got here, it was a line out the door.
Oh, wow.
And the parking lot was packed. And so I was really, really happy to see that so many people in Leucadia came out and they wanted to know what was going on with at-grade crossings. You know, there's concern too about the noise associated with at-grade crossings. And it looks like the parties are working together to address all of those issues. And they had the board set up in the other room, in the poinsettia room, and showing what the different plans were. Basically, the plans are for 2 different crossings, and there's 2 different ideas for each one, whether it could be at like slightly different places, and there's a jig or a jag, depending on where it's going to be crossing the 101. And they had comment cards for people. And so it was more of an opportunity for people to go in and look at what the plans might look like. It was really crowded, so it was actually pretty hard to get around the room and see what the plans looked like. But I think that was actually a good thing, because it showed so much community involvement and interest in having safe crossings in Leucadia. And at the city council meeting during the presentation, I'm not sure the number, it's either 260 or 270, but they told us that they did a camera for a 24-hour period in that quarter, and they counted, it's either 260 or 270 people illegally crossing the railroad tracks in that area. So it's clear that it is an issue, it is a problem, and because that number is so high, it meets a threshold to show that it is dangerous. So, which will ultimately, I think, help us get funding that we need in order to build them. And also, added bonus of it being at-grade crossing is it could happen sooner, and the price is a lot cheaper than the other ideas. It's about $1 million to $1.2 million for each one. So, as opposed to multi-million-dollar projects. So anyway, it was, I learned a lot of information from both the city council meeting, the presentation there, and then wanted to tell you about the meeting. So it looks like we're moving forward, and hopefully that continues in that positive way.
Far out. Well, thank you very much. I mean, this is something Leucadia has wanted for a long time. I mean, we have 2 stretches. I've measured them. They're 1.4 miles. From Leucadia Boulevard to La Costa, there's no crossings. We have a similar situation from the Santa Fe crossing down to the next one down, which I think is Chesterfield. Again, 1.4 miles. They mimic each other. The biggest difference is Leucadia's legal crossings are really, really substandard. I mean, crossing at La Costa is very dangerous, as is crossing at the one side of the tracks at Leucadia Boulevard that you can. So this is great. I mean, progress. This was progress that people, even a couple of years ago, would have said is impossible.
Right. And I think there's another differentiation, too, is that on the west side of the 101 in Leucadia, you have a significant number of businesses and homes, versus down further south, it's mostly beach access.
Yep.
So I think that that's one of the reasons there's so much illegal crossing, is people are crossing not just to get to the beach, but to get to neighbors across the railroad tracks and to get to all those businesses across on the 101.
Yeah, and all the brand-new amenities from Streetscape are very attractive, and people want to get over there.
They do, and they want to be able to park on Vulcan and cross the tracks to get there.
Well, I hope that becomes possible. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Steve, you're the only one else? I got nothing I'm going to share right now. I'll pass this on to our secretary, Anna Kalamusi, to see if we have any reports.
Just one, the Coastal Commission will be hearing the parking code amendments for inclusionary and tandem parking. That will be on February 9th, next week. And that's all I have.
And that's it? In that case, I'll look around for my little gavel, and I will declare this meeting closed at 6:30 on the button, 30 minutes. Thank you.